I am so excited. Thank you all for tuning in to week 3 of our community conversations for Black History Month. I'd like to start out with thanking CentraCare and the Workplace Patient and Diversity Department, which I am from. The best department in CentraCare. Yay! Yes. Thank you to the African American ERG and our partners, CAIRO and Zedek TV. We are here this week with home ownership. This is something that is very important. As we know, home ownership is the gateway to generational wealth. So you really want to pay attention, but not only that, ask questions of this panel because they are good people to know. With that, I am going to turn it over to this week's moderator, Anika Robbins of Anika Foundation.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today here at CAIRO. My name is Anika Robbins. I'm the president and CEO of the Anika Foundation. We are a nonprofit organization founded in 2008 in the Twin Cities, and we mobilize around civic engagement, economic empowerment, and health equity. We're excited to be here to have this conversation around home ownership in Minnesota, to be exact, Black home ownership in Minnesota. We are going to have a robust and direct conversation, an honest conversation about how we can close some of those gaps and make sure that more Black immigrants, African immigrants, and historical African Americans can get more access to home ownership. I'm joined by an amazing panel of experts, some of our region's topmost thought leaders who will be sharing their wisdom and expertise with us today. And without further ado, to my far right is Ms. Ann Provo, Partner Solutions Team Lead with Minnesota Housing. Please give her a round of applause. Next to her is Nicole Sandy. She's a realtor with Coldwell Banker Burnett, and please give her a round of applause. Last but definitely not least is Chad Boley, the Executive Director for Habitat for Humanity for Central Minnesota. Please welcome him. So this conversation around Black homeownership, it's a sensitive subject. We're aware of the racial and historic and systemic disparities that have plagued the community around this topic and several other sectors around food, transportation, and several other things. There have been studies and statistics that suggest that European Americans, white Americans, have had a 237-year head start on accumulating wealth and building that generational wealth for their families and laying those foundations. Right here in Minnesota, some of the early efforts to address and right the historical wrongs around housing began here in our state with folks like Dr. Josie Johnson and Walter Mondale, who went on to become a vice president of the United States. From that, Minnesota was the first in the nation to launch the Human Rights Department. We saw the Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act, from which Title VIII, the Fair Housing Act, came out of. But here's the thing, 55 years later, we are still looking at and trying to address rank disparities in housing. And so we're going to jump right into our conversation. We know that right here in St. Cloud, it's a problem. And so we know, for instance, that there's a gap. So Black homeownership rate amongst African Americans is 12% roughly. For Caucasian Americans, it is 72%. Meaning that 72% of white Americans have homes, they are homeowners, and only 12% of African Americans own homes. That's like a close to a 60% gap. It is dismal. And so without further ado, we're going to go right over to our state's administrator of housing and get some insights from her. Why do you feel those disparities persist? Let's talk about it. And I know you have some statistics specific to St. Cloud, so let's have it.
All right. Thank you so much for the question. And yes, we do see that there is definitely a disparity in in homeownership. We have pulled some numbers. 75% of Black or African Americans in the Tri-County area live within the city of St. Cloud. Okay. So, for comparison, only 25% of all households of the Tri-County area are within the city of St. Cloud. The homeownership rate for all households in the Tri-County area is 72%. And for Black or African American households, the homeownership rate is 15% in the Tri-County area. In St. Cloud, Black or African American households have an 8% homeownership rate. So there's definitely room for improvement. The median age of Black or African American population in the city of St. Cloud is 22 years old. The median age for white non-Hispanic in the city in St. Cloud is 37. So this is a large gap in age, and to that fact, the area's population is going to be becoming more increasingly diverse. So there's so much opportunity for improvement in that, and this is from 2022. This is a data source that we received from 2022. And some of the key points with that that I want to talk about is that there's a significant work that needs to continue to be done in closing the homeownership gap in this region, and it to better reflect a better demographic. Minnesota Housing is working on so many areas, and the focus on education for first-time home buyers is a big part of that. Working with agencies for home ownership counselors, that is also a big part. That's a great place to start, and you have to start somewhere, and education, we feel, is a big part of that.
Thank you so much for that, Ann. But let's ask, whose role is it to ensure fair and equitable access to home ownership, or to enforce fair lending practices? Is that in the purview of Minnesota's housing agency?
Actually, it is the lending partners that we work with. Minnesota Housing is not a lender. We kind of sit in the middle, and we work with lending partners. We create programs for them to utilize. And these programs are home ownership based. We also have some home improvement programs, but the home ownership programs for first-time home buyers, repeat homeowners, refinancing, all of that has to come from a program that works with conventional Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, government, FHA, VA, rural development. And that's what our lending partners that work with us, that participate with this program, that's what they work with on a day-to-day basis. So it makes sense to have them work with our programs, and that's why we partner. So in fair lending, they deal with that.
Can you go to those statistics real quick?
Yes.
Do you mind? Since we have, there we are, right there.
There you go.
Yes, because it helps to have a visual, right? It's one thing to look at and hear numbers. It's quite another to see the stark numbers and the contrast. Very stunning indeed. Only an 8% home ownership rate for Black or African American households in the city of St. Cloud. So much work to do indeed. And with that, we're going to segue over to Chad, who's new to the St. Cloud area, but is not new to housing. He comes to St. Cloud from the Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity branch with a wealth of experience and keenly aware of the work that needs to be done. So Chad, redlining and restrictive covenants were rendered illegal in 1953, but even as recent as 1981, some of those have still been found. Many people, it's still in their deeds, right? So I know that you had expressed that as part of the critical work that you're hoping to do in your role. How is Habitat for Humanity addressing these historic racial barriers today?
Thank you very much. And maybe I'll start a little bit with Twin Cities Habitat, where we did spend a lot of time working on racial covenants and redlining work, which segued into a lack of mortgages through the GI Bill for vets coming back from World War II. So the damage was done by the time down in Twin Cities they decided to build an interstate. And that interstate, of course, where's the cheapest place to build an interstate? Where the value of the homes is the least, right? So guess who got hit? foundational African Americans. And so damage historically has been immense and continues to just snowball. What can we do today? I think it has to be a conscious effort to focus in that area. When I was at Twin Cities Habitat, we actually had a buyback come back, and sure enough, we had a racial covenants on one of our deeds. So,
What do you do when you come across a property like that?
we had the deed updated, revised, and had that stripped out. It cost us a little bit of money, but the symbolism of that was critically important.
Major. Thank you. So, Nicole, you've lived in St. Cloud for over 10 years, and 2 of those years have been as a realtor. What are some of the things that you've heard when working with families and individuals around trying to secure the dream of home ownership? What are some of the barriers? Now, we've talked about some of the historic barriers, but what are some of the other things that you've encountered in working with families and individuals?
Primarily is education, the lack of education, the knowledge. A lot of people do not know what programs are out there. They really don't. So that creates a barrier, and some too maybe feel that maybe they're not welcome, or they're going to talk down on the person, or they don't understand my problems. So they maybe not approach or want to have that interaction or that conversation.
When we talked earlier this week, there's a lot of historic trauma even within the African American community regarding money, wealth management. We talked about several priorities, right? And housing just sometimes isn't that first thing that's top of mind.
Right.
Because you have bills,
Yes.
childcare and several other things, and maybe the income isn't there. But I think sometimes folks talk themselves out of the possibility of becoming a homeowner. Do you find that sometimes?
Absolutely. That is, if not, one of the biggest challenges as far as approaching the subject, talking about it. Most would rather put food on you have to put food on the table first. So that avenue is like, well, I'm not open to talking about home ownership if I have to put food on the table, if I need to pay my bills and things of that nature.
You also mentioned about having the money conversation, right? That can be a very vulnerable conversation when you have to kind of bear all into your financial situation, your bank accounts, how much is or isn't in the account. It's very vulnerable. So what would you say to someone who has some of those barriers or those feelings of like not wanting to be exposed and feeling like maybe they can't be helped?
I would say it's challenging to have these conversations, but let's put a plan to it. Let's have the conversation. Let's address the issue. Let's have a plan and moving forward what best to do concerning the situation. And if we have a plan together, it's best we would know how to help with all the other areas and structure it in like what's the top priority, what needs to be focused on, and how to maybe build credit too, or work on credit and securing jobs and things of that nature. So
okay, is credit an absolute barrier nowadays? I mean, it was a big deal. It's always a big deal, right? But is it still the barrier that maybe it used to be, especially now with the availability of so many programs and trying to remove barriers? What's your thought on that?
it is still a barrier. It is needed, unless you're buying cash. Right.
Okay.
So it is a barrier. It is something that needs to be worked on individually or with whomever you're partnering up with to buy the home. Yeah.
Okay. So what's the ideal credit score?
Oof. That is tricky, but 620. Yeah. 620.
And what do you think?
Well, the Minnesota housing programs, the conventional goes to 640.
Okay.
Is the minimum credit score, and then FHA would be 650.
Okay. All right. Good to know. Yeah, Chad. Are you on? You didn't hold it.
Okay, there you go. Sorry. Tech. That's why I have my children. I was just going to add the other thing that we've seen, even when there is a good credit score, is that debt to income ratio that has been a struggle that we found.
Okay, that's good to point out. So, Nicole, back to you. If someone's ready or they're kind of thinking about, stepping into the homeownership waters, what is the first thing that you would recommend doing? Now, you mentioned a plan, but maybe what is the very first thing that they should be thinking about, or what should they do? And then should they immediately reach out to you as a realtor, and then, is it a broker? Can you just help clarify some of those things?
Sure. So I would say definitely reaching out to a realtor or a lender to start the process. And it can be just soft warming up. Just have the conversation, know where you stand, because the whole home ownership journey is a process. It can be an immediate thing, but it takes time. It is a process, so give yourself or anyone really to go through the journey, the process of having the conversation, talking about, I would like this, maybe I need to work on this, because we don't know until we look at each individual, where they are at and what they can afford or what they need to work on.
You say time. How much time are we, like, on average? I know, like you said, everyone's experience is different.
I would say, personally, it took me 3 months.
Okay.
But
go, girl.
No, not everybody is like me. It can take 6 months, up to a year. I'm working with folks that have been along the journey for over 18 months.
Okay.
Because we have a plan in place and they're working on it. So it's individual, really.
Okay. Thank you. And
Yeah, and one thing to add to that is we get a lot of phone calls in at the agency and about, I want to start looking for a house. I understand you have first-time homebuyer programs. How do I do this? Our first recommendation is education. Reach out to a home ownership counselor and have them work with you on the credit and what it's going to take to get ready to buy a house. You may find that, yep, I want to do this. And if you're ready, you're ready. But if you're not ready, they're going to recommend what you can do to get ready. And then, working with an agent like Nicole, that is huge because they're also going to show you from her side of things what you need to be prepared for. And then once you've reached out to that homeownership counselor, we also have approved first-time homebuyer education that's on our website, which we'll share at the end. But that education helps you from where you're at right now. I'm thinking about this. Once you find a lender, what are they going to request from me? What type of documentation? Once they go through that documentation and get you pre-approved and working with your agent, finding a house, going through the underwriting process, getting to closing, and then what happens after closing?
Right.
It's not just from here to here, it's from here to way over here. Right. So it's important to educate yourself.
That's fantastic. You want to add to that?
I wanted to add to that. I mentioned that it took me 3 months, but mind you, I was preparing for like 2.5 before.
Okay.
Like I knew where I wanted to be.
Yes.
Like I wanted to be in the conventional bracket. So I saved and I saved and I saved
When
everything.
you say you wanted to be in the conventional bracket, help the audience understand what that means.
So there are different type of loans available. First-time homebuyer program is there. You have the conventional, the USDA, and then you have the VA loans. So depending on where one will fall in or where they want to be in, it goes a little bit more in depth.
Sure.
But
that's where having a skilled and expert realtor like yourself to help people make sense of all of these various products and programs. So listen, we talked earlier about some of the historic wrongs, and it sounds as if Minnesota Housing and organizations like Habitat for Humanity are doing some things to try to correct things, right? So we know recently Minnesota legislature passed $1 billion in investments in housing, including the launch of a first-time and first-generation homebuyer program. Ann, tell us about this. This sounds amazing.
Oh, it's so exciting.
we're all excited.
Pull the side up if you're able to. Yeah.
So, if Okay.
All right.
The First Generation Homebuyer Program. It's a really exciting program. It is launching this spring. It is not something that we have available at this moment. But the exciting thing is it's coming. We're working on the legal process, getting the marketing put together, getting our systems ready for lenders to be able to work with. And and the nice thing about this program is it is a deferred, interest-free, forgivable down payment and closing cost loan up to $35,000. 50% of the loan is forgiven at 10 years of the anniversary date from your closing. So then
That's
if
incredible.
yes, it is. And then if you stay in your home for the entire 20-year term, on that 20th year, the last part of that loan is forgiven. So it is a great opportunity to get into a home. The First Generation Homebuyer Program works with our First Time Homebuyer Program, which is called Startup. And Minnesota Housing has been around for over 50 years. So we have some programs that have been around for a really long time. But to be eligible for forgiveness, first of all, the borrower must reside in the home throughout the forgiveness date. The borrowers are going to sign a note and a mortgage specific to First Generation, as well as a loan affidavit attesting to their First Generation status. Borrowers cannot get a new DPA if they subordinate existing, if they do end up refinancing. And then for our lenders, I don't know if there are any lenders in this room, but we just ask you to reach out to your legal and compliance for disclosing purposes. So the program itself is, as far as, and if you could advance the slide one, to be qualified for a first generation home buyer, if your parents or your legal guardians have never owned a home in this country and in any other country, or owned a home but lost it due to foreclosure, then you may be eligible for this program. So it is really an exciting program.
That's awesome. And you touched a little bit on that. You may potentially be able to kind of pair the two, the First Generation and the First Time.
Yep.
These are two separate programs.
Yep.
Okay. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So the program is, there are actually a couple different programs. There is it's required to have a first mortgage program with Minnesota Housing, which is our startup program. And that base layer is a conventional Fannie or Freddie or a government, FHA, VA, rural development. And then you can pick a first generation home buyer loan, which is either Minnesota Housing's program, or MMCDC has also got a program, and it's coming from the same pool of funds from the legislature, but it is not our program, so they can't be paired together. So you can pick one or the other. And then from there, the other option is our monthly payment loan, which we have a down payment assistance loan, which is a 10-year term. It's got an interest rate, needs to be paid back. And then we have a deferred payment loan. And we have it's deferred, meaning that there is a 0% interest rate. There is no payment during this time frame. But if you took your first mortgage to 30 years, that's when your second mortgage comes due. So it's a balloon. We call it a balloon. So it's deferred payment. And then there's a deferred payment loan plus, which just gives you a little bit higher loan amounts, which I have information on that if you want to go over that.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ann. So, Chad, let's go to you. I mean, Habitat for Humanity's got some great programs. We're talking a little bit about your origins, and you all were really ahead of your time in many ways. But tell us about the education and maybe the lending products you have, and just give people who may not be aware of what you do, what your organization does.
Sure, absolutely. So we are an affordable homeownership program. So all of the families that go through our program are purchasing a home that we build. What we have up at Central Minnesota Habitat is a 0% interest mortgage. Whatever you can afford on that first mortgage, up to 30% of your monthly income is what you'll pay on your first mortgage. Everything else will go on a silent second or third, depending on what it looks like. That silent second is then forgiven over 30 years. So it's a very dynamic mortgage to really build equity for families. It started back in the late 1940s on a commune, a Christian commune, actually, Koinonia Farms, where African Americans and whites worked together. And so equal pay, equal work. So actually Habitat started out of the civil rights movement as its history. So it's kind of an interesting little tidbit as we continue to try to work through the continued issues that we have today.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Ann and I were talking about this earlier. Oftentimes there are programs that are designed to close some of those gaps, but sometimes in the process of it, the criteria can be overwhelming and can pose a barrier in itself. What are you guys doing? So Habitat, we'll start with you again, Chad, and
Sure.
then we'll go back to Ann. But how are your programs different? How are you making it easier for folks? Because I know that some things you need to have a criteria. You need to be able to afford your home, right? But we know that when we talk about those historic barriers, some of that is income related. Some of that is because of that 237-year head start economically. How is Habitat for Humanity, not you? How are you addressing that?
Well, maybe I'll start with, currently we serve the 35 to 60% AMI range. What we found down at Twin Cities, and I think is gonna be supported up here also, is that when we look at what we call foundational African Americans, or those that were descended from slavery, is they tend to be a little bit more up in that 60 to 80% income range with other barriers, like debt to income and that sort of thing. So I'm looking at Central Minnesota Habitat and looking to move into that space so we can focus more on those foundational African American families a little bit more. 90% of the families we serve right now are African American. Unfortunately, foundational African American families, over the last 5 years, we served 0.
Ouch.
I actually had our homeowner services person look back on how many families we served over the last 10 years that are foundational African American. And that number was, anybody want to take a guess? 0. So we're doing a terrible job serving foundational African Americans. And we need to do a much, much better job. There's a couple things that we need to do. One is moving up into that higher AMI range. The other thing we need to do is look at the sweat equity component of Habitat, and that as being an obstacle for single head of household families, which you tend to see more in foundational African American families. So we need to take a hard look and see, is that something that we can continue to do at the current hours we require.
Awesome. Ann, do you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. Minnesota Housing, because our programs follow agency guidelines, like conventional Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and government guidelines for their programs, they actually go up to 115% of AMI. And so there are some benefits when you get below 80% AMI. Charter rate mortgage insurance, which is a lower cost mortgage insurance. So there's some strong benefits to that. The other thing is with debt to income ratios, credit score, debt to income ratio, all of that makes a big difference. And some of the programs will go up to 50% debt to income ratio, which is very favorable. However, it also has to make sense for the individual. Just because you can go that high doesn't mean you should go that high.
Right.
But that's an individual thing that you have to be comfortable with and knowing what you have. There are also other things that maybe you're looking to buy a house and you're not qualifying, so you want to utilize a non-occupant co-signer to help you co-sign for the loan. Those things are available. So not counting yourself out is look at all the options and then decide what it is that is best for you in your situation.
Awesome. So we're going to before my couple final questions here, let's just be a quick glossary real quick, because you've mentioned, a lot of you have said a lot of terms that may or may not have resonated. So Debt to income ratio. Who wants to go? What is that?
Sure. Your debt to income ratio is a percentage of the debt that you carry on a monthly basis to the
money you
income.
owe, sorry.
The money you owe that based from the gross income that you receive in a month. So that percentage is your debt to income ratio.
Awesome. Thank you. AMI. Who wants to?
Okay, I'll
Anne's
do it.
carrying it. Okay. And then LMI. Yes.
Area median income and low to moderate income.
So what does that mean? What do each of those mean?
What that means is the area median income, it's a percentage of income for the individuals that are at that income. So if you're at 80% of the area median income, that means that if you're at, I'm just going to use easy numbers because it's just easy. But 100,000 a year somebody makes. Well, 80% of that is 80,000, right? So if you're at 60,000, then 80% of that would be your area median income. It depends on what that median income is for that area.
So median is like the sum of, yes, the
And
geography.
that can change based off of county. That is not necessarily an entire state thing. That is by county typically. And it's for us, for Minnesota Housing, it's set by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. It's not set by Minnesota Housing.
Who are Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac? Who are
Yes.
these people? No, I'm kidding.
Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. They are the conventional loan companies that buy. They have their own programs. Conventional is a loan term that we use for many things, but conventional loans with your Fannie, that's the government-backed or the agency-backed loan type. So that would be your Fannie, just like FHA. FHA is a government-type product, and then conventional, they're government, but they're independent agencies.
Okay, awesome. You guys want to add anything to that? No. All right. So real quick, let us know, what are we looking at in terms of the financial process of the road to home ownership? We talked about a plan, working with a lender, realtor, but in terms of like people, and I know many of the folks in the audience, right, they're thinking about it, but what should they be saving a certain amount of money? We've often heard like 2 years of work history, 2 years of solid rental history and those kinds of things. Kind of walk through that timeline, not your 3-month time, not even your 5-month, but what on average for, individuals who are interested in pursuing that, what does that financial journey look like for them? What do they need to start doing now?
I would say definitely start saving. As I mentioned earlier, although it took me 3 months to find my home, but I was preparing for 2.5 years. So I didn't just arrive to it. I had maybe a little bit of money saved up. I don't remember exactly, but I just knew where I wanted to be in after speaking with the lender, and I just got to work. Like, okay, give me some time. Let me work on me, and I just started saving. So saving is definitely very important, and also paying attention to your credit score. I can't.
How does one do that?
As far as I'll start with the saving. As much as you can. Everybody is different, whatever it looks like for you. I would say as much as you can. I had to cut a lot of things out. Cut Starbucks out. Minimize buying clothes and shoes, which I do enjoy, but I had to cut those things out. So, and it was temporary because I knew I had a goal that I wanted to work towards too. So, needed a place not only for myself but also for my children, and I had a goal. I stuck with it, saved, and got there. Yeah.
Could I a little bit? Okay.
Please, yes, jump in there.
One thing when looking for a real estate agent, I would highly recommend you find somebody who understands down payment assistance programs, like Nicole here. So look for somebody specialized in those areas to really give you that boost. And then as Central Minnesota Habitat goes, we don't require a credit score, just a solid job for a year, pay stub
1
showing
year.
that you can maintain your home and afford it, go through classes. So we're a little bit different.
And that's the key, right? It's one thing to get the home. It's quite another to keep it, right? That's awesome. So on that note of advice to community, what would you tell? And I know that we have quite a few young adults in the audience and they're thinking about it. What advice would you give to the community overall, members of the audience who are interested in buying a home? Just kind of final thoughts on that. And encouragement, yeah.
Just invest in lottery tickets. No, I'm just kidding. I take that back. But I would say the one thing that especially when I was at Twin Cities, and I'm sure I'm going to feel that here also, is that there's a certain amount of trust that needs to get built up with the organization. I hope tonight is part of that building of trust. But I would say make sure whomever you're working with, it has to be somebody that you trust, and as I already mentioned, knows the kind of the nuances of some of these programs.
That's awesome. Then we'll go to Ann, and then we'll come back to you.
And start with the education process. Reach out to a homeownership counselor. Go to the Minnesota Housing website, mnhousing.gov. And take a look at the homebuyer education courses. Then have a realtor that specializes. Absolutely. And just remember, one of the big myths that are out there, and I hear it on a regular basis, is, you need 20% down.
Yes.
You do not.
Yes.
That is a myth. You
All
do
right,
not.
Ann. That's great. No, tell more on that.
So
That's great.
you can
I
get
heard that a lot.
97% loan to value on your first, the loan versus the value of the property. So 97% can be your first mortgage. You can get a second mortgage, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but up to $18,000 to cover closing costs and part of the down payment, and you can get in with as little as $1,000. But it's very, very important to take that education and understand what it is that you're getting into, and is this the journey you want to take right now?
Awesome. Nicole.
I was going to say the same thing with education, being familiar with the programs that are available. And I'm glad that you mentioned that you don't need 20% down. There's so many programs available that as little as you said, like $1,000, $3,000, first-time home buyer programs, whatever, VA, any military people, veterans, USDA loans available. So it's broad, and until you speak with someone that understands and knows these programs, you may not know what is available. But don't be intimidated. Just talk, ask the questions. There is no such thing as a wrong question, or no. Just ask the questions, and you'll be informed, I would say.
That's awesome. So I have a question around investing. Do any of Habitat for Humanity or Minnesota Housing offer loan programs or any other programs around investment properties? Because I know that that's something that's also of interest in communities of color in terms of building and creating that generational wealth. Please say yes.
We don't do too much in investment properties at Central Min Habitat. That said, it was an area I was poking at a little bit down in Twin Cities in regards to duplexes. There's a lot of duplexes down there, having a family purchase a duplex and lease out the other part. Didn't quite get off the ground before I left, though.
Yes, and our programs, all of Minnesota Housing programs, are primary residence only. However, the duplex piece is allowable, and ADUs, which is accessory dwelling units. So if you've got they used to call a mother-in-law apartment or something like that, accessory dwelling units are also okay. But a 2-unit property is completely okay with Minnesota Housing, and if that is something that works for you and your families.
That's fantastic. We have an example of a family, a young woman that had gone through our home stretch programs and things, and she was able to secure a duplex, and she talks about how her monthly expenses were $72 a month. So she lives in one unit and then rents the other, and the rent from that second unit is covering all of the house's expenses. So it's very doable, and so that's encouraging. I will be in touch. But let's talk about joy. This is the last conversation. It's been a long road and journey, and there are efforts in place to try to right these historic wrongs and close the gaps. It's not going to be overnight. But Nicole, you talked about your journey to becoming a homeowner. How did you feel when you closed on your home? You're already
about it. I couldn't believe it. I literally could not believe it. Like, did I do this? Did this happen for me? And it was a big deal, but I knew that I wanted it as much, not only for myself, but also for my children. And coming from a second generation, from that place, it was a big deal. It's exciting, even now, just to hear that my son can be loud in the basement and just enjoy his home. I mean, I'm upstairs, but I'm like, oh my, this is a great feeling. Like we are in our own space. This is his backyard. He can invite friends over. And it's a beautiful thing. And I wish that for any and everybody, that it's possible for you. I have a story. I'm willing to share it. And if it happened for me, it can happen for any one of us here.
I know. I got a little teary-eyed too. I love it. Well, I would like to thank our audience for being a great audience. I hope we answered a lot of your questions. Okay, so before I excuse our guests, let's open up for questions. I heard a lot of chattering. So by show of hands, you do? Yes, ma'am. Yes.
So I have a question for the folks from the state and Habitat for Humanity, because you see that 8% number, right? And so we're saying about education and all of that, and then usually it's mandatory for your loans. But it's like, where's the education here in St. Cloud? They don't have education programs. And then I'm wondering, why isn't the state, it's a two-parter, and I'm wondering, why isn't the state, they can control the flow of things. They can control the money. Why don't they have a more streamlined program specifically for Black Americans? Because the numbers are so stark there. We're not even 20%, 30%, that's when you say you're trying to get the equity up. We're past that. So why aren't they answering that? That's my question.
Sure. So when you're accepted into the Central Minnesota Habitat for Humanity program, then you go through the education process. There's 2 steps of financial education, HUD certified counselor type work that we do with Catholic Charities. So I know that there is some counseling that is here available, and then we do maintenance, community, how to be a good community member, how to understand your mortgage, how to understand your second mortgage, that sort of thing. So we do that part.
Yeah, I know you talked about the homebuyer education, that it's not always available in this area. We have on our website approved courses that you can start. Number one, you can use any agency, any other agency that has a home ownership or home ownership counseling. You can use. Yep, exactly. You can use any of them. They're all so good. And the programs that we have approved at Minnesota Housing, we don't approve all of them. Like Fannie Mae's Home View course is not an approved course. And the reason is the ones that we've approved have the robust content that we're looking for to educate, to truly give you the information that you need in order to make a good decision. And those are available. And some of them are online, some of them are remote. Home stretch is, some of them are in person, some of them are video. So it's not just because somebody doesn't have the education course maybe in their community specifically, it's still available, and that is, and not all of them cost money either. Like Freddie Mac's Credit Smart Homebuyer U course, that is an online course, may take like 4 hours. It's a really long course, but it's a really good course, and it's free. So, and that is one of our approved courses. And as far as the disparities, the things that have happened in the past, unfortunately, I can't change. All we can do is learn from it and move forward, and do things to try to set us up for success going forward. I wasn't a part of some of it. Maybe I was. I don't know. But I'm not going to. I've only been with the state for just over a year, so.
And it's like, don't come for me.
Wait a minute.
Could I add a little piece?
But I am. We see the disparities. We see that there needs to be things, and that's why we're out talking about this. We are at events all over the state of Minnesota. Because it's important. It's important to educate, and it's important to take a step forward. I'm not perfect. A lot of our educators and administrators and legislatures, they're not perfect either. And there's a lot of work to be done. But that's what we're doing here at the state. We have people working full time to work on that specifically with legislatures. So that's.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Ann. Chad, yes, please feel free to chime in.
Just real quick, I was going to say,
Let me sit down.
relative to,
Until they're ready.
I'm sorry.
I'm gonna sit down until he's ready.
There's creative ways to look at it, though, that can focus, I think, a little bit. For example, I know down in the city of St. Paul, where the interstate got blasted through the Rondo neighborhood, they created, Mayor Carter recently created an inheritance fund for those families, which is primarily focused on, it's not solely race-based, but 90% of the folks that live there
That's right.
were African American. So I think there's ways to do it with geography if we continue to be creative.
I'm going to piggyback on that too. So our organization is a partner with Minnesota Housing, and we were just having this conversation about how important it is for our state institutions, the public entities, to partner more with community organizations and nonprofits that serve specific communities and cultural groups. And that really came to light during the pandemic. And so for the first time, agencies like Department of Health, Minnesota Housing, and Education, they really realized that they were at a deficit in engaging and communicating all the great programs. So that was the other thing. A plethora of programs. There's no shortage of great programs that are available, but often there's not an awareness of those programs. And so the state knows, and they're trying to work on those things, and I'm not here to apologize on their behalf. We've been in those conversations, like, you have to communicate with the African American community through the publications and media outlets that we utilize, or like the Sahan Journals and the group that is here today recording us. So they're getting better. More work needs to be done, but I would also say that goes back to you. So like finding out what those programs are and also advocating. So there are opportunities often. We've participated in surveys that the state has put out about when they're starting to think about new programs, they try to get input from the community on designing what those programs should look like and what barriers need to be removed. So I'm my activist hat is coming on, but you have to get in, activate, engage, but it's both and, right? Like the state entities have to meet us, but we also have to urge them and let them know what they're missing. So it's twofold. I see that we had a question. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question and a comment. So,
Okay.
to answer your question, I don't want to disregard you guys.
1 minute.
But yeah, I'll take less than that.
Thank you.
I work for U.S. Bank. All the bankers, we work with people to you're going to miss steps. They're going to tell you your DTI. They're not going to tell you you're going to have to add light bill and gas bill. So if you make $50,000 a year, they're not adding on all the bills you'll have to pay in the process. So that's what we do as bankers here in St. Cloud. We get together and we educate our people about your DTI, your actual debt to income, your actual credit score, how to get it to the 720 or 680 or whatever. It's a lot of process. I'm down to U.S. Bank. You can always stop in. Don't care if you bank there or not. I got you. I got you.
I love it.
So I appreciate you guys. So I guess I'm confused about the Habitat to Humanity. You helped zero. You helped zero. And I'm just figuring out how you determined to help zero African American people. You build these houses. They're available. I'm not understanding. Even though you said the criteria of 30% of somebody's income, the income could be $700. I'm not understanding how they don't get in the house with income, debt to income, your credit score, and the fact that the knowledge, the education that should be given to each individual to break it down to how they get it. Like, you missed 5 steps on the panel today. I'm listening to you guys, but I'm like, wait a minute. 1, 2, 3, step 4, we jump to, because I'm the bottom person. I'm the person you come to when your credit score is 480 and you want to get to 720. You want me to show you your DTI. You want to show you how to get to wherever you need to be in 1 year to get you to you guys. So I feel like you guys bypassed that whole step, the whole 5 steps. So maybe you guys could elaborate, or I don't know if you know that you missed them. That's about you, the situation, the steps. So you guys, you're the realtor. They're going to come to you to buy the house, and you're going to have the qualifications, right? And you're going to say, go to this educational piece. The educational piece, I've been through all those programs. So I am the type of person, I will sit in to listen to see how you're going to educate the people. Then there's a miseducation. You're saying, go build your credit score, or you have this debt, get rid of this debt, or save $12,000. You're missing, here's how to save $12,000. Here's the steps to get that credit score to 725. A, B, C, D, and E. You're just saying to do something without the back it up to do it. You can't just tell somebody, save every dollar, don't buy shoes, don't buy Starbucks. You have to navigate with them to show them how to get there before getting to you. So I feel like the whole circle was missed as you guys sat up here. And I do this for a living, so I see the piece.
So let me ask you then.
Yes.
What do you say, so outside of saving and maybe cutting out certain expenses, what is a missing link from that conversation?
It's the sit down of what is your plans. So let's say I want to buy a house in a year. I don't know anything about house. I don't know about any of your acronyms. I'm a person on the street. I want to meet you where you are. You say, okay, this is the forefront of getting there in 12 months. I see that your credit score is 420. I'm not going to tell you go work on your credit score. I'm going to say, this is what I need you to do. Let's pull this credit score. You owe Verizon, you got a collection here, you got this. We're going to delete all this, and I'm going to show you how to get it going.
Okay.
So I feel like the process was just missed.
Okay, let me say something. I hear what you're saying. So you wanted us to go a little deeper,
Yes,
a little more
in depth.
granular, and I think that we said it, just not in detail. So let me explain. So when we use words like education, instead of us going through, like when you meet with Nicole or you go to Habitat for Humanity, that's where you're going to get that detail. We're limited to an hour and a half, and I'm pretty sure we're over. But so we can't go in through every single step. But at the end of this conversation, we're going to list the website for Minnesota Housing, which is mnhousing.gov, and then NicoleSandy.com, and CMHF, so for the purposes of this conversation, it is going to be somewhat high level in that we're not going to be as deep in the weeds of the specific steps that you get in the educational programs that all of them have stated repeatedly. So I understand this is what you do.
Right, but I've been to the website, and I've been to the Minnesota website, the HUD website, the house.
Okay.
It does not have that there. I've been through. I went
They
to the
have
training course.
No,
I'm talking about the actual, the step-by-step on how to get
no,
there.
it's not going to do that either. But I hear your point. I want to make sure that we are acknowledging
I don't wanna kill
other
your time.
folks. And I think Ann has a response for you too. Thank you so much, though, for
Here
your
you go.
comment.
Oh,
Thank
yeah,
you.
no.
Yeah, and one thing that I know we didn't talk about this, but when you think about you want to save money to buy a house, and when you start making that decision and you start going through the education that we've talked about, you got to think about, I have to pay myself first. We get our paychecks, right? And we get, and then we think, oh, I got to pay this bill, I got to pay this bill, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do this, I want to go buy this. And you get through all those things, but you never paid yourself first. Putting money for yourself. What's $20? If you go $25, if you go $30, whatever it is, whatever that number is, you put that aside before you do all those things, and then you budget around it. And that's one way. That's not the only way. That's just one way. And there's a lot of different ways when you pay yourself first. As far as, we always, I went to the seminar and it was about, okay, so how much is a cup of coffee when you go to Starbucks? It could be like $6, $7. It's a lot of money. And so you think about that. Okay, if I did that 5 times a week, how much money am I spending? And then if I have to cut back, how much am I willing to cut back? Am I willing to cut back 2 days, 3 days, maybe 5 days? Maybe I'll just make coffee at home. I don't know. But
That's what I did. Started making Folgers.
And that's what I did when I wanted to buy a house. That is one of the ways that I paid myself first, and I put that savings into a savings account. So there's one.
Thank you, Ed.
I just want to touch on that. And as I mentioned and gave those examples of like cutting out Starbucks and shopping, this is an individual. That's right. It's my story is not going to be anybody else's. It's an individual. So if I had to cut out Starbucks, that's something that I did. A person may have to save, let's say, $500 every month. And that's that individual, because we don't know what is their budget, what they're starting from, what they can afford, what they cannot afford. If somebody asks me to save $500 a month, I can afford that. If you ask me to save $5,000 a month, I'll be looking at you like, no, I can't afford to save $5,000 a month. Somebody maybe, if they're, a millionaire or a doctor, but each individual has to think of maybe their own budget and what they can afford to save. But I am willing to speak with you after this, and we can put a plan together. We can take accountability of each other.
I love that.
And I can check in every week. How
girl.
are you doing?
Yes.
We can make something work.
I love
I'll
it.
hold you accountable. You hold me accountable.
That's fantastic.
And we can make it happen.
That's fantastic. Give her another round of applause. So, I want to stress something that's really important. Whether it's the 25 or the 500, the point is to get in the habit of saving and to do it consistently. Like, that's really kind of the underlying message. We did a retreat with our team, and they were amazed at how much money they had spent on things. I'm not going to name any names, but when they started looking at the amount of money they spent on the shoes, sometimes it's hair, it's, Uber Eats and DoorDash and all of those things. Or like my favorite, TJ Maxx and $9.99 you to death, right? So when you start looking at and really, so having that relationship with your money is important. But again, we're not going to sit here today and go through all of the specific steps, but there are programs that do it, and you have someone right here in St. Cloud who's willing to walk that journey with you. But I would encourage you to be ready, right? To be ready mentally, but also be ready financially, regardless of how much you're starting with. What's important is to start and to be consistent, right? Nita, I see you have a question in the back.
Yeah, I had more of a comment.
Okay.
So I just wanted to tell everybody on the panel, thank you. This was very informative. It actually pointed me in the right direction to know what I need to start working on and who I need to reach out to. So thank you for that. My other comment was I work with communities who have Section 8 vouchers. And so that was like some of the things we were discussing actually before. It would have been interesting just to see like someone from HRA who maybe can solve, can answer some of the questions that we have. But what we were talking about was like, what are the opportunities for people who do have a low income voucher as far as home ownership? Are there any other programs that you guys are aware of that could service these people? And that was basically it.
That's a great question.
I know you may not be able to answer it. It's more of a HRA question, but it's all about giving people the opportunity and getting people out of poverty. And that would be like a very powerful stair step. So if you can't answer, I totally get that. It's not your, organization, but if you can, that would be helpful.
So there are opportunities. Not a lot of lenders have a lot of education around that in utilizing those vouchers for home ownership. But yes, you can utilize them for home ownership. And my recommendation would be to reach out to us at Minnesota Housing, and we can work with you on finding the lender that does work with that. There are specific lenders out there, but we can work with you on that. And my team, Partner Solutions team, we answer the phones for anybody calling into the agency, as well as all of our partners calling into the agency for assistance. So when you call in and ask about a question like that, and who do I reach out to, that is where we can give you that referral.
That's fantastic. Thank you. You will be our last question. Thank you.
So I was wondering if you guys can kind of go back and explain what AMI and debt to income means for the youth, because my vocabulary isn't all the way there, so I just want to get a better understanding of what that means so I can know what I'm talking about when I come to a counselor or agent. And I have another question, since this is the last question. Habitat activity locally?
Yes.
How do we sign up for that?
We'll be getting to. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
So that's a little bit of the challenging news right now. Is applications are closed right now. We have 300 people on the list just waiting for when applications open up again. We're hoping to have them opening up in about 6 months. So
You're going to have to sign up to their website and get on their.
Yeah, if I can get your email address, you can certainly we'll send out an e-news. We send out monthly e-newsletters, and when it opens back up, it'll be in there.
The bad news is that they're closed now, but they'll reopen in 6 months, which means what? That gives you time to start saving, right? You see how that works? Little Jedi mind tricks here. Okay, and
Okay, so your debt to income ratio.
Yes.
That is a ratio that is between the debts that you owe or the monthly payments. So, and now just a reminder, when a lender is looking at your debt to income ratio, they're only looking at the debts that you're carrying on your credit report. Okay? So they're not looking at debts like your car insurance. They're not looking at, student loans. If they're reported on your credit bureau, they're on there. And yes, they are counting that. So you have to look at, that's why it's important for you to decide, what level of debt to income ratio you can handle based off of what you also have within your household. So you're going to have your utilities, you're going to have your property taxes for a home are going to be considered part of your mortgage payment. But your lender or a homeownership counselor can walk you through that. And so you don't have to know it all when you go into talk with those counselors or your lender. That is their job to be able to assist you and walk you through that and show you on paper, here's what you've got. So don't think that you have to know it all before you go in.
Yes.
Let them do their job. And as a lender, it is their job to do. They work with this every day. If they're going too fast for you and you're like, whoa, what was that? That is where you have to stop them and say, I don't understand. Can you please explain that? And if you're asking them multiple times, that means they have to explain it a different way.
That's right.
So make sure that you're getting your answers completed. That's important. It's a relationship. Just like you have a relationship with your real estate agent, and it's a good relationship, you have to have that with your lender as well, because they're working with you on your credit. They're working with you on what your income is and what they're using, because that's the percentage. And area median income is based off of Fannie and Freddie, or the conventional GSEs, we call them. They set that for the housing finance agencies in the counties, and it's based off of data that they receive. And so they change on a yearly basis. They just recently updated them, and only a few counties changed. Otherwise, most of them stayed the same. So, don't worry about not knowing what that is, because the lender, when they have what's called an automated underwriting system, which is with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and it goes through that, and it actually tells them exactly where you're at. So, work with your lender. Work with your lender.
Thanks, Ann. Nicole?
And I would say that keep it simple. The big names, big words, don't let that intimidate you. That's number one. Number two, form a relationship, whether it be with the lender or the realtor. I keep a fair, I like relationships, just because I don't want to leave you just because, oh yeah, you closed. No, I want to check in on you. How are you doing? How did the first month go? Okay. If we have a relationship, whether it's Facebook or text or phone call, you're gonna see me, or I'm gonna cross your path. Tax season comes. Okay, this is what you need to do. Right. So it is a relationship for life. It is not just to, okay, well, we close and then that's it. I still have people that I talk to, send them birthday gift. If anything happens in their family, oh, I want you to stop by. I'm connecting you with a friend. It is a whole relationship. So maintain that, ask questions. As far as like the big words, don't let it intimidate you. It is a process, and you're definitely not alone.
That's the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Chad, did you have any final thoughts or anything to add to that? No? Okay. With that, we're going to thank everyone. I'd like to thank our panelists. We have Miss Ann Provo with Minnesota Housing. Thank her. Please give her a round of applause for being a guest with us today. And to reach her, to ask more questions and find out more about Minnesota Housing's program, their website is MN, so M, N as in Nancy, housing.gov, okay? And then next we have Nicole Sandy. To reach her, you can reach her at NicoleSandy.com. Sandy is SANDE, okay? Last but not least, well, second to last, Chad Bowley with Habitat for Humanity. Their website is C, M as in Mary, H as in Harry, F as in Frank, H as in Harry.org. So that's Central Minnesota Habitat for Humanity.org. Last but not least, I've been your moderator this evening. I hope you enjoyed this conversation and got a lot of your questions answered. We know that it is not exhaustive, and sometimes in having conversations, more questions come. You can reach us at the AnikaFoundation.org, 1N, 1K. Thank you so much. We also want to send our thanks to CentraCare for hosting and convening this series for Black History Month. Black wealth generation, creating generational wealth is very important, and so all of us here are partners in community to help get you closer to your goals. Special shout out to Erica Scott and our film production crew, and of course our host this evening, CAIRO. So thank you for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
I just wanted, there's one person, Muhammad, he's standing up here. He has done great work with our video and recording. And just one last thing, I didn't get the young lady's name, but I would love to see Nicole and U.S. Bank have classes for this area, because you had an 8% rate. And so I hope you take that home to U.S. Bank and tell them that, and come up with maybe some streamlines. So I am looking forward to that. And I certainly, I'm a connector, but I'm a doer too. So I'm not just saying it.
I should ask, even though your program, thank you, even though you're closed, are you still offering the home education workshops and classes?
It's we're the builder, the bank, and the bridge, so it's all kind of one program once you enter the program. So we don't offer it to the general public. Yeah.
Sounds good. All right.
They
Yes.
have a great program
Yes.
too. But I would love to see something for the area. Something
Yeah.
that even teenagers can get a.
Oh, yeah.
And it starts that young. You don't have to have
Yeah.
classes like this in a
Right.
rural area.
Right.
Because they already know it. They said in their high school, they already.
Well, then that's our Jumpstart program.
And if it's
Yes, I appreciate that. I was
And-
trying to be humble, but yes, the Anika Foundation has the Jumpstart program, and we're talking to high school students about
Yeah.
rent, how to be a good a good tenant, how to start building your history, being employed, and then we're also planting seeds with teenagers about thinking about home ownership and not waiting until they're 30 and 40. And so many of the youth and young adults that we've been engaging, they have now started to incorporate home ownership goals at age 30, 35. So we're excited about that. They have a lot of questions, but we are doing that hand holding and walking people through the journey and stuff. But looking forward to partner and collaborate. You too, sis. And we are a Minnesota housing partner and a trusted messenger and have been for the past 5 years since COVID. So look for more from us, and we're happy to collaborate with some of the organizations in the room as well. Thanks again, Erica. All right, thank y'all.